my son-in-law shared something unforgettable. You won't believe what transpired. I never imagined that this could occur in my life. Avoid making the same errors I did. It all commenced on a Thursday afternoon in mid-October, the sort of day when sunlight cascades in golden beams across the backyard, and the breeze carries the scent of dry leaves and far-off fireplaces. As I folded laundry in the sunroom, I found myself only partially attentive to the gentle hum of a daytime talk show playing in the background. Since my husband's passing, life has settled into a stillness that, while unspoken, often weighs upon me more than I can endure. At the tender age of 22, my daughter Carrie entered into matrimony with a man named Michael. Initially, I had my doubts about him. It seemed excessively refined, I mused, overly captivating. However, with the passage of time, my perspective has evolved. He exhibited patience, thoughtfulness, and a consistent respectfulness in his interactions with me. Perhaps it leans towards perfection, if I may be candid. Throughout the years, I became increasingly aware of aspects about him that I perhaps ought not to have observed. His gaze held a moment longer during our casual conversation. He chuckled at my dry jokes, even when they missed the mark. At that moment, it held no significance. That is what I reassured myself. On that Thursday, Carrie reached out to inform me that she would be delayed at work and requested that I allow Michael entry when he arrived to collect a package. Absolutely, I agreed. I gave it little consideration. I brewed a pot of tea, donned a cozy cardigan, and patiently awaited the sound of the doorbell. Upon his arrival, he greeted everyone with that familiar warm smile he consistently displayed. His coat retained the crispness of the autumn air, and his fragrance, a blend of cedar wood and a subtle hint of citrus, trailed behind him as he entered. We engaged in a brief conversation about trivial matters, just as we typically do. Just as he was about to depart, he hesitated. "For a long time, there's something I've been wanting to express," he remarked, positioned in the doorway, hands buried deep in his pockets. I raised my gaze from the delicate rim of my teacup. "What is that?" He paused, and I noticed a change in his expression, perhaps a sense of vulnerability or discord. "I find myself thinking about you more than I ought to," he finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is something I hesitate to share, yet it has been weighing heavily on my mind. Your presence lingers in the mind." My breath was momentarily halted. A wave of warmth surged to my cheeks, an instinctive flush that rendered my fingers unsteady. A prolonged, painful silence ensued. I ought to have laughed, should have urged him to leave, referred to Carrie in some way. However, I did not. I stood there, heart racing, bewildered and acutely conscious of how long it had been since anyone had regarded me in such a manner. "Michael," I began, yet there was no subsequent sentence to continue with. He advanced cautiously, deliberately, as if he wished to avoid surprising me. "I have no intention of showing any disrespect towards you, or Carrie. I understand how this may come across. I truly see you. You are not unseen, not in my view." And then he departed, just like that. The screen door creaked shut behind him, leaving me in the silence, still cradling my teacup, the steam now dissipated and curling like wisps of smoke. For days, I revisited that moment in my thoughts. His gaze, his tone, the manner in which he expressed that he noticed me. I was unable to let it go. Not due to its scandalous nature, but because at my core I recognized that I had been yearning for that type of attention. Not romantic, not even necessarily physical, but to be recognized, to be acknowledged as a woman who still harbors desires, thoughts, and dreams. More than a mother, a widow, a mere placeholder in another's existence. I attempted to persuade myself that it was insignificant, a brief lapse in his strength. I certainly wouldn't share that with Carrie. It would only cause her pain. It was not worth jeopardizing her trust or her marriage for mere words that lingered like smoke in the air. A lingering part of me, one I wasn't particularly proud of, wished he would speak again, and he certainly did. A week later, I encountered him again at Carrie's house. She found herself lagging once more. She had always been that way, and Michael graciously offered me a glass of wine as we waited. I agreed, although I seldom indulged in drinking. We gathered on the back deck, the sky adorned in hues of orange and lavender. He remained silent at first. We just witnessed the sunset, enveloped in a tranquil silence that only exists between those who have found comfort in each other's company. "Indeed," I whispered, "I did." He remained at a distance. He neither reached out nor made any bold statements. He nodded slowly, his gaze locked onto mine. "I have no intention of causing harm to anyone," he stated. "Certainly not you or Carrie. However, I can no longer deceive myself. There is something present here." The sincerity in his voice captivated me. I had been dwelling in shadows for an extended period. Echo of my late husband, echo of motherhood, echo of age. And here stood this man, not merely observing me, but genuinely desiring to understand me, the authentic version of myself. That evening, I found myself lying in bed, wide awake for hours on end, attuned to the rhythmic tick of the clock perched on the dresser. I hear the subtle creak of the house as it settles around me. I was uncertain about the next steps to take. Each potential action felt akin to an act of treachery. However, what of the possibility of betraying my own self? For how long had I suppressed the truth of my longing for companionship, intimacy, and a genuine conversation free from pretense? Weeks passed by. Our moments flourished, not in controversy, but in nuance. A gentle touch of hands as a dish is passed during dinner, an extended embrace during our greetings or farewells, discussions that extended beyond their intended significance. I started to recognize myself once more, not as I was in my 20s or 30s, but as I am now, seasoned, perhaps even fearful, yet undeniably alive. I found that I didn't experience guilt to the extent I had anticipated. Primarily, I experienced awakened. A pivotal moment unfolded on a rainy Sunday evening. Michael arrived with a toolbox to repair a kitchen cabinet that had begun to sag. Carrie enjoyed an outing with her friends. I extended an invitation for coffee. We gathered in the kitchen, observing the rain as it cascaded down the windows. The atmosphere was laden with unexpressed sentiments. "You are worthy of more than mere memories," he stated, his voice gravelly with an intensity that surpassed mere longing. "You are worthy of being treasured." For the first time in years, I allowed myself to shed tears in the presence of another, not from sorrow, but from pure relief. That night, we maintained our boundaries, not in a physical sense. However, a significant transformation occurred in our relationship, an action that I could never reverse. I had no desire to do so. What ensued was not a tumultuous escapade, nor a hasty flirtation, but rather a gradual revelation, a meticulous unveiling of layers. Though we have yet to utter the word love, it exists, quietly flourishing in the pauses that linger between our conversations. I resumed writing, an activity I had not engaged in for years. I began my mornings with a walk, paying careful attention to my attire and hairstyle. Not for him, but because I had recalled the importance of self-care. Naturally, secrets cannot remain concealed indefinitely. One evening, Carrie observed a certain quality in the way we gazed at one another. A glimmer of doubt appeared on her face. She remained silent in that moment, yet the atmosphere changed. I sensed that a reckoning was on the horizon. I found myself uncertain about my readiness. The subsequent week unfolded with the deliberate pace of turning pages in a weighty tome. I discovered that my days were spent in a state of tension, my thoughts intertwined like yarn in a cluttered drawer. Each word I uttered to Carrie seemed to carry the weight of a challenge. Each look from Michael carried an overwhelming significance. I tried to convince myself that I was merely imagining that Carrie had overlooked something. A daughter understands her mother in the same way a mother comprehends her child. An unspoken understanding exists between us, profound and impossible to overlook. Once more, it was Thursday, the day that had ignited it all. Carrie extended an invitation for dinner, a straightforward family gathering. As I entered the house, the comforting aroma of lemon herb chicken wafted through the air, a delightful result of her attempt at a new recipe discovered online. Michael was present, arranging the table, his sleeves rolled up, his gaze meeting mine the instant I walked in. He offered a smile, the courteous sort exchanged with a stranger in an elevator, not the one he previously provided to me. That smile, his smile, was gone. The dinner experience was unusual, a peculiar sensation where, despite the absence of any real issues, everything seemed amiss. Carrie engaged in conversation with an unusual fervor, posing numerous questions and laughing with heightened exuberance. Michael remained silent, allowing his wife's enthusiasm to infuse the meal with life. I attempted to maintain composure, yet I could sense my hands trembling as I handed over the salad bowl. Midway through the meal, Carrie politely excused herself to retrieve dessert from the fridge. Michael extended his hand across the table to replenish my wine glass, and for a fleeting moment, our fingers made contact. The atmosphere transformed. I raised my gaze, and he followed suit. At that moment, Carrie reappeared, gracefully carrying a tray adorned with delicate glasses of panna cotta. She halted in the doorway, her gaze darting between us, that instinct igniting once more. The following day, she made a call. "Mom," she inquired with caution, "may I ask you something?" My throat constricted. "Certainly. Has there been a shift in the dynamic between you and Michael?" I became immobilized. The silence that enveloped us extended, delicate and elongated. She completed it. "Recently, his gaze towards you has changed. What about you? I am uncertain." Perhaps I am merely envisioning it. However, a change occurred. I was at a loss for words. I found it impossible to be dishonest, not in a blatant manner. However, I found myself unable to reveal the truth to her as well. "Not everything. You're not imagining things," I finally said, my voice gentle. "However, it may not be as you presume. The situation is intricate." She paused in silence for a brief moment. "I am uncertain about my thoughts. I have a strong sense that something is present. It fills me with fear." I longed to extend my hand through the phone and embrace her, assuring her that all would be well. However, I had my doubts about the validity of that statement. That evening, Michael reached out to me via phone. Not a message, not an email, but a genuine phone call. "I believe she is aware," he remarked, his voice laden with weight. I responded that she doesn't know everything. He stated that she is not obligated to. "It is sufficient to recognize that something is amiss." I reclined in my dimly lit living room, observing the flicker of headlights as they swept across the window. "We must halt," I declared. "A moment of stillness." "Do you wish to cease?" he inquired. I confessed that I no longer know what I desire. However, I was aware I desired him. I felt a deep sense of self-loathing for it. The upcoming weeks unfolded in a haze of uncomfortable encounters, measured phrases, and profound quietude. Carrie continued to extend invitations to me, seemingly attempting to demonstrate that all was well. The tension lingered between us, akin to a fog that refused to dissipate. One afternoon, Michael arrived at my house without prior notice. "I had to see you," he said, standing in the doorway, rain soaking through his jacket. I sense that my mental clarity is slipping away. I permitted him entry. He perched on the edge of the couch, hands intertwined, as if hesitant to make contact with anything. It has been quite some time since we last communicated. At last, he turned his gaze toward me, his eyes weary and brimming with a hint of sorrow. "I never intended for this to occur," he stated. "However, I can no longer maintain the facade of indifference. Concerning you, regarding what we once shared, or still share, I understand," I murmured. "I cannot either." He extended his hand, lightly placing his fingers upon mine. No kiss, no embrace, simply make contact. An understated, poignant movement that conveyed deeper meaning than any spoken language could express. Once more, I experienced that profound, comforting resonance beneath my skin. The acknowledgement of my continued presence, still able to experience emotions, to yearn. He expressed his concern, stating that he does not wish to cause any pain to Carrie. I don't either. However, I no longer wish to exist in a state of half-hearted living. His words lingered between us, challenging the silence. That evening, I found myself unable to sleep. As I reclined in my bed, cradling a cup of tea, my gaze lingered on the framed photograph of my late husband resting on the dresser. I recalled how he would gently tuck my hair behind my ear while I read in the quiet of the night. The manner in which he smiled as he poured my coffee. He was an admirable individual, yet he had been absent for years, and I had transformed into a mere specter within my own dwelling. Michael had reminded me that I remained a being of flesh, breath, and soul. However, the expense of that reminder was becoming evident. 2 days later, Carrie arrived at my door. "May we have a conversation?" she inquired. I moved aside to allow her entry. Her eyes were crimson, yet she had not shed a tear. Not at this time. She mentioned that she asked Michael. I inquired about what was happening. My heart pounded steadily. She stated that he was truthful, not quite. However, he also did not refute it. He remarked that the two of you share an understanding unlike any he has experienced with anyone else. She regarded me then, not with anger, not with betrayal, but with something far more unsettling. Disappointment. "I don't even know how to feel," she whispered. I extended my hand towards hers. She permitted me to take it. "I never desired this," I stated. "This is not the way." "However it occurred," she stated. "Indeed." She rose, clearing her tears. "I require some time," she stated. "I don't harbor any ill feelings towards you. However, I require some distance to understand what this situation signifies." She departed without embracing me. Once the door clicked shut, I settled back down, left to confront the whirlwind of consequences I had a hand in creating. I refrained from calling Michael that night. I refrained from writing and did not respond when he sent a text. I required time as well. It was time to determine what I was prepared to sacrifice and what I was ready to defend. I possessed no solutions. There was a profound realization that something within me had transformed irrevocably. The house had never experienced such profound stillness. Once Carrie departed that day, the silence enveloped me, resonating more profoundly than any dispute ever might. I traversed the rooms as if I were an outsider, gliding my fingers over the contours of picture frames and vacant vases, observing the dust that had previously escaped my notice. The wind outside seemed to hush, as though the entire world was pausing in anticipation. It has been a week since I last heard from Carrie. There are no calls or messages. The absence pierced profoundly, more acutely than I had anticipated. As you nurture a child, there is an unwavering belief that the connection you share can endure any challenge. Yet certain wounds do not bleed. They merely bruise silently, penetrating deeper than one might comprehend. Michael sent a message. I miss you. Are you feeling all right? I gazed at the screen for an extended period before ultimately typing, no, but I will be, I did not send it. I opted for walks instead. The attic has been thoroughly cleaned. I have resumed the art of cooking, moving beyond merely reheating leftovers to engaging in the true culinary experience. Meals infused with flavor, spice, and intention. The act of working with my hands provided a sense of grounding, a reminder that life continued to progress, even when I felt stagnant within. On one of those early morning walks, with dew glistening on the grass and a crisp chill in the air, I encountered an old friend from church, Ellen. As she walked her dog, she approached me with a warm hug, accompanied by that familiar tilt of her head that signaled she sensed something was amiss. "You seem to have lost some weight," she remarked, a hint of worry in her voice. "All is well. I've been carrying quite a bit in my thoughts," I admitted candidly. "Would you like to engage in a conversation?" I found myself nodding in surprise. We settled onto a bench beside the duck pond, enjoying coffee from her thermos. I withheld the complete narrative, omitting names and specifics, yet I shared sufficient information. An unexpected arrival in my life. I had made choices I never realized I was capable of making. My daughter was understandably upset with me. Ellen listened with an open mind. She neither reprimanded nor offered guidance. Upon completing my task, she gazed at the pond and remarked, "Life is messier than what people portray. Love even more profoundly." The relief was overwhelming, almost bringing me to tears. The exchange provided me with the necessary fortitude to confront the challenges of the following day. On that particular afternoon, Carrie made a call. Her voice carried a sense of caution, yet it remained warm. "Shall we arrange a meeting?" We selected a quaint cafe in the downtown area, a place we frequented during her high school years following her dance recitals. As I entered, the delightful aroma of cinnamon and freshly baked pastries enveloped me. She was already seated with 2 cups of coffee placed on the table. She still recalled how I took mine. We engaged in conversation. Initially, there was illumination. Engage in your tasks, atmospheric conditions, minor details that danced around the significant burden we shared. At last, she inhaled deeply and fixed her gaze directly upon me. "Are you in love with him?" I refrained from responding right away. I delved into my emotions, apprehensive of the reality and wary of the potential price of deception. "I cannot say for certain that it's love," I remarked, "yet it is genuine, and it holds significance." She inclined her head gradually. Her fingers toyed with the handle of her cup. "You were always more than my mother," she said after a moment. "I knew that, but I didn't want to think of you as someone who still needed that kind of connection." "I didn't think I needed it either," I admitted, until I realized how long I'd been pretending not to. Tears welled in her eyes. She brushed them away. "I'm angry," she said, "but I'm also sad because I don't know what this means for any of us." "I don't either," I said, "but I'm here and I'm still your mother." Nothing changes that. We left the cafe with a hug, brief but real. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of something softer than resentment. That night, I sat in my kitchen, sipping tea, thinking about everything that had happened, about the man I had grown to care for in ways that defied reason, about the daughter who still held a piece of my soul, about the woman I was becoming, somewhere between the past and the future. I picked up my phone and dialed Michael. "Hello," I responded when he picked up. His voice resonated with warmth, surprise, and a touch of hope. "Hello, I would like to meet with you. However, it is important for you to grasp a certain point." "Anything," he stated. "This is not about fleeing the life you lead or evading your marriage. For us to progress, it must be genuine. It must be authentic. Step into the light. If that entails stepping back, then we shall step back. However, should we choose to remain and delve into this, it will be with a clear and open perspective." The line was filled with an unsettling quiet. Gradually, clarity begins to dawn upon me. I desire that as well. We convened the following day, not in secrecy, not in obscurity, but in plain sight. A community green space, a bench basking in the sunlight. Two individuals navigating their identities and the significance of their connection. He mentioned that he had also conversed with Carrie. They engaged in an extensive and challenging discussion. They were uncertain about what lay ahead, yet there was a newfound honesty present, and suffering, perhaps a sanctuary for restoration. "I can't predict what the future holds," he said, extending his hand towards mine with a gentle touch. "Neither do I," I replied, "yet I no longer fear it." That evening, I experienced a full night's sleep for the first time in weeks, not due to the absence of flaws, but because I had made the decision to cease concealing my true feelings. I had finally stepped out of the shadows in my own existence, nor was he. The arrival of winter was notably premature that year. In late October, the first frost made its appearance, covering the grass with a shimmering layer and creating intricate designs on my windows each morning. The chill penetrated deeply, yet within me a warmth had begun to flourish. Not enthusiasm, not a fantasy, however, something much more tangible, embracing the moment. The days unfolded with a languid pace. Carrie and I engaged in conversation more frequently, albeit never for extended periods. She inquired about recipes once more, shared images of her new throw pillows, and even offered assistance with the gutters on one occasion. That was her method of offering reconciliation, conveyed not through words, but through actions. I embraced each one with grace, akin to a woman welcoming rain after a long dry spell. Michael and I exercised caution. In the light of day, we shared moments over coffee and strolled through public gardens, ever mindful of the constraints of our time and the delicate nature of our connection. No declarations were made, no guarantees, the profound solace that comes from being truly understood. He exhibited caution. He had ceased to evade his marriage. He stood motionless, attentive, and I mirrored his stillness. On a mid-November afternoon, he presented me with a book. Although it wasn't wrapped, it was evident that it had been chosen with care. A worn hardcover collection of poems by Wendell Berry, a personal favorite of mine. He recalled, "I discovered it at a second-hand store," he remarked, presenting it to me as if revealing a secret. "It reminded me of you." I grasped it firmly with both hands, the aroma of aged paper wafting from its pages. I turned to a well-worn poem and started to read it aloud. The words lingered between us, imbued with a sense of reverence. As I raised my gaze, I noticed that his eyes glistened with moisture. "You make me feel like I matter," he said softly. I extended my hand across the table and grasped his. "You do indeed." It transcended age, guilt, and the notions of right and wrong. It was centered around presence. The type that remains steadfast in the face of a storm. We were two individuals who had unexpectedly found ourselves in an emotional closeness that we both required. In our own subtle and deliberate manner, we allowed it to unfold. Certainly, there were moments of uncertainty. On nights, I found myself gazing at the ceiling, contemplating whether I had crossed a line that could never be undone. Questioning whether I had permanently damaged my daughter's trust. Each time Carrie reached out, whether to discuss work, share a new recipe, or simply to hear my voice, I felt the gradual rediscovery of one another. We were establishing a new foundation, uncertain yet sincere. Next arrived Thanksgiving. I received an invitation from Carrie. She expressed it as if she doubted my agreement. "You're not obligated to attend," she added. "I wanted to take a moment to let you know that you are indeed welcome." "I would be delighted to," I replied, suppressing the feelings that accompanied those words. I donned a forest green sweater I had been reserving, one that accentuated the gray in my hair and the gentleness in my eyes. I presented my renowned cranberry orange muffins alongside a bottle of white wine. Upon my arrival, Carrie welcomed me at the door with a tentative smile. Michael lingered in the hallway behind her, cradling their dog in his arms, as if the comfort of the moment could ease the palpable tension surrounding them. The dinner was delightful, with moments of awkwardness, yet it felt genuine. We reminisced about cherished family tales, chuckled at the turkey's slightly dry outcome, and exchanged dishes with ease, as if we hadn't navigated a minefield just weeks prior. At a certain moment, Carrie stood up to replenish the drinks, leaving me alone with Michael in the kitchen. We did not make contact. There was no necessity for that. "Thank you for coming," he said softly, his eyes brimming with a sense of tranquility. "I appreciate your willingness to accommodate," I remarked. He nodded, and for the first time, I felt he was prepared to step back, not from fear, but from a place of respect. For Carrie, for myself, for everything that had transpired. Following dessert, as we lingered in the doorway to bid farewell, Carrie enveloped me in a warm embrace. "Mom," she said, pulling back just enough to meet my gaze. "I understand that things cannot return to their previous state, but I am grateful for your continued presence, for the fact that you remain you." Tears welled at the corners of my eyes. I pressed my lips gently against her cheek. "I am consistently available." As I made my way home, I lowered the window just a bit, allowing the brisk air to brush against my face. The sky presented a rich, deep blue, adorned with the first twinkling stars of the evening. The silence no longer felt oppressive. It felt deserved. Michael and I continue to communicate from time to time. A message, an insightful article shared, a follow-up regarding Carrie's well-being. That chapter of whatever we were is now closed, not with regret, but with a sense of reverence. We entered into the extraordinary and emerged with our hearts unscathed. This experience has imparted valuable lessons to me. Life does not always provide tidy conclusions. It presents you with contradictions and challenges you to confront them, to exist in the gray areas, to release shame and welcome complexity. I have made errors. I have caused pain to someone dear to me, yet in this journey, I have also unearthed my true self. A woman who is not limited by age, loss, or sacrifice, but rather defined by the profound and beautiful reality that she continues to feel deeply. To all who are reading, listening, or perhaps quietly contemplating your presence here, remember not to lose sight of your true self amidst the roles that others may impose upon you. It is perfectly acceptable to experience emotions, to have desires, to embrace transformation, and perhaps, just perhaps, to embark on a new beginning, even if it diverges from your original vision.